Okay, great. I think we're all ready to get started now. So I'm really happy to be here. Thank you very much for inviting me to come. It's been a great morning already. And when Dee asked me to prepare something to talk about here, I couldn't quite understand. Are we talking about digital books? Are we talking about the future of education? And we were trying to work that out, and she just said, yes, talk about that. So that really helped me because I think they're very interconnected. And to echo the person this morning who led the workshop, the world, and as you look at these kind of questions, is very complicated. There are no simple answers. There is no clean path. We saw the fragmentation in the number of devices, the number of channels that you can buy, book content, trade content, the fact that users opt for PDF still because they don't understand what EPUB is. And that's just the world that we live in. And having worked almost my entire career in the world of information, and having been at a big conference, information conference last week in the UK, the reality is every aspect of the information industry is in a state of flux. And it has been for 15 years, and it may be for another 15 years as we sort out how all of this stuff is going to work. So today we're going to talk a little bit about the learning environment and content for the learning environment. So I thought, well, let's just go ahead and start pulling some quotes off the recent web and off from different newspapers, because the fact is it tells a story all by itself. I don't really need to add anything to this particular quote. This is a quote from our education chief saying, wants everything in digital textbooks as soon as possible. And in South Korea, they for a while were saying by 2015, they wanted to be all digital textbooks by 2015. So then here's another one. This is a common theme. We're going to visit this quite a bit during the next hour. You know, how is education going to be transformed on the web? Again, I thought it was really interesting that the idea of the book, really that transforming it itself, the ultimate destination for an electronic book, a digital book, is the web. That's where we need to go. And I think a lot of people argue that education and learning also needs to go to the web and go there fast. Even the Chronicle of Higher Ed is asking this question. Although I will be honest in saying that they were taking the contrarian point of view in this particular article, that there wasn't an instant revolution coming. So there's a lot of debate. And then finally, this one I really found powerful because this is a conference that's happening on the Federal Reserve on Monday. So just in the last 24 hours, I was invited to another conference on Tuesday, kind of wondering why I got invited yesterday to go to New York on Tuesday, but nonetheless, it shows how current all this is. So for those of you who haven't seen it, I would like to play a little bit of the video from the edX announcement. Oops. Yeah, can you? As loud as it can be there. All right, we'll try again here. So different is for many faculty and students at MIT studying the same kind of all of them MIT recognize an incredible. So many good vistas in education. All that education for students around the world will be the next big thing in education. This is the single biggest change in education since the printing press. Harvard and MIT will be courses in education
students as well as for those around the world. Our goal is to educate 1 billion people around the world.
Online education not in any
technology enabled education to as learning.
If you're accessing, if you're like interact with the course, it really tailors the experience.
So I won't play the whole thing because it's a few more minutes, but does anybody have any questions? Because it seems like they have it all figured out where it's going. So I think we could stop the talk there. We'll just watch how edX sorts it all out. But I did think it's pretty powerful. I think the way they're looking at all the stakeholders, they're trying to figure out a system and a model, and they're trying to lead a vision of where this can all go. And they're putting a lot of money behind it, as are a lot of other similarly funded and structured new businesses. So with that as an intro, I want to talk a little bit about Credo Reference because we have an interesting history in the information world, and our history may mirror some of the history or some of the future of what's going to happen in education and learning. I'll talk a little bit about what I think is at stake and why changes in education are necessary and what is likely to happen in terms of how education will evolve, at least as how we see it evolving from Credo's point of view. And then I'll share a few case studies in terms of where is the innovation happening right now? How are digital textbooks evolving? How is the classroom evolving? So we'll go through all of that. And then I'll leave you with a little more parting inspiration at the end since there is so much confusion, I'll leave you with some hope. So in terms of key takeaways, what I really think is we are entering a very profound period of change, and we've already entered it, and it will continue to accelerate, and certain parts of what we do will change dramatically fairly quickly, and other parts will take more time to change. And so you'll see this, and certainly you've seen that in many aspects of the information world, where some things change very fast, some things take longer, but the key point is there's lots of change. And that what will change is everything. The content, the tools, the services, they're going to all evolve very rapidly. And they're going to evolve in ways that, again, we need to be engaged in and try to understand. And when we think about that, we all need to put our hats on as business people, as educators, as subject matter experts, as teachers, as everything, and think about how are we going to be serving in this new environment, and where can we add value in this new environment? And I think that's a really important distinction, and I really make a big point of that, because as we go through what happened at Credo, our business has evolved a lot in 10 years, and it's because the world in which we operate has changed a lot in those 10 years. And we've constantly had to push the envelope of where do we add value, and then how do we make that value recognized by the key stakeholders that we serve. So for those of you who don't know Credo, I'll give you a little bit of background. We started in 1999. We were one of the first ad-supported reference sites on the web. And so we were one of the early providers of reference content like a reference.com, dictionary.com. And then a little thing happened called the dot-com bubble, and it burst, and ad-supported business models weren't as successful for a little while. And so we changed our business model. We became a subscription service. We continued to aggregate reference content from the best publishers around the world. And we did a lot of markup. We did a lot of interconnection of the content, much what we were talking about this morning, a lot of the ways that we can bring intelligence out of the content. Sorry. Up loud. Okay. So then, as we were evolving, a little thing came along which was called Wikipedia, and so maybe some of you have heard of that. I'm not sure, but it tended to really have a major disruptive impact in the world of reference publishing, and even it had profound impact for reference librarianship. And so we were growing our business as this was unfolding in parallel, and I think it it informed a lot of the decisions we made and a lot of the choices that we had to make. So again, a little more background on us. We have 80 reference publishers as part of our platform. We take all of their content, we mark it up, we mix it together and create one giant encyclopedia. And so you can search any topic and fairly in-depth. So we're talking about subject encyclopedias here. We're talking about really in-depth academic content. Our focus had been primarily on higher education, but we also serve libraries of all types, and we serve institutions all around the world. And we like to really think of our database as 3.5 million entries. We don't like to think of it as 1,500 books, again, because what is a book in the world of online information? We want to think of it as just a corpus of information that can be used and integrated and leveraged in a variety of ways. So here are some of the 1,500 titles. Here are some of the jacket images. And we have, again, there's about 1,500 more of them that are all interconnected in this massive database of information. So our content, our digital content, we got rid of the book idea, the format of the book. For many of our users, they don't care the distinction between one publisher or one title. They just want authoritative content that they can leverage. And so in this case, this is an example of an entry from our database. You can see we were talking this morning about rich markup inside of the text. We've been doing that for a decade or more. So you can link within the book, link within our entire database, and then also link outside of Credo to other resources. And then because of all this rich connectivity of content, we also have this great visualization tool that's excellent for visual learners. It helps people map their understanding of how the content is interconnected, how terms relate to each other. And again, it's a derivative product. You couldn't do this in a print world, but because of the way we've marked up all the content and shown relationships, we can create a visualization that students can use to brainstorm or do pre-searching or begin to develop theses or understanding of the whole landscape. So with that, in terms of challenges, and again, these are some of the same exact themes that I'm hearing and seeing in the education and learning environment. This idea of commoditization. So the content is freely available. In this case, Wikipedia had a lot of freely available content. It was hard for some people to understand the difference between authoritative content, non-authoritative content. And so that was a big challenge for us to differentiate in that way. Second thing that we had to deal with is the disintermediation of our core buyer. The reference librarian, a lot of places, was a function that was, as many of you know, there's fewer of them. They had fewer resources to spend on tools like Credo. And so at a time where we felt it was really important to get this tool and this service out there, there was a hard time finding a buyer that had the resources to do so. Then, of course, in 2008, when I joined the company, we had a big economic downturn. And then finally, within institutions, and the libraries will talk a lot about this, the scholarly journals were always the first to get funded, and other databases and tools came after that. So we had a lot of headwinds coming at us, and we had to really figure out how are we going to innovate, how are we going to demonstrate value. It's not good enough to say, hey, we know reference content is really critical, we know how valuable it is to students' learning outcomes, you should just buy it. We had to figure out what can we do, where can we add value. So we began to look in the marketplace, where can we meet unmet needs? And we started to see that big issue for libraries and institutions was making sure that their resources on their campus were being able to be easily found in an online world, that they were being able to be found outside of the firewall. So we started to focus on that. We started to focus on the issue that universities often have a lot of disconnected databases that aren't well integrated. Case study we just worked on with Columbia University, they have 1,900 databases. So it begins to be a challenge for end users when there's that much fragmentation. I mean, we talked about 30 different ebook platforms this morning. How about 1,900 databases? That's a pretty big challenge. Issues around how does the content actually get out into the curriculum? This is something that's really critical. Some universities do an excellent job at this. For some of our customers, it's a real challenge if they don't have the resources to get into the classroom. Another big thing that we were dealing with is, and it's reported in the OCLC's perception of libraries, people still think of the library as a place with books. And that's a challenge that we are trying to help our customers change that perception and help add value in that way. And then the last thing is, in this age of information at your fingertips, how do we make sure that the students and the users of that information use it in ways that are appropriate, they know how to evaluate information and so forth. So again, we started to look at how do we add value in that area. So one of the first things that we did in terms of innovation was to create what we call a topic page. And the topic pages are an all-in-one starting point for a topic. So they're much like a Wikipedia page. They give you really good background material on a topic. They give you context. They give you vocabulary that you need to search something. We designed to be discoverable on the open web so students can come across them, and we see rapid growth in the discoverability of them over the last several years. And they also allow the librarians and our customers to connect their institutional resources into this information portal. So they're all customized based on the resources that a library has. So if we take a quick look, you can see up in the left-hand corner, there's a logo from the library. And then there's a reference article from our database as the main article that gives you background on a topic. And then as we scroll down the page, you'll see that as the page has a lot of really great in-depth resources from the local library that student's a part of. In this case, we're talking about ebooks from eBrary or the library catalog, or from journals like JSTOR, journal databases. So we're trying to mash up all of that information and put all of the authoritative information that the users have access to at their fingertips. One easy stop for that. And then as you go further down, we can pull in information from the open web like videos. We can add a whole recommended reading list at the bottom. And so we have about 10,000 of these topic pages. And for each of our customers, they can look different because each customer has different resources. And so it really offers a really good starting point for a topic, a great discoverability tool. And another area where we started to innovate was working, we have a customer that had 24 instructional librarians, I believe, in 2005, and now they have 4 instructional librarians. So they needed a lot of help with building tutorials, building videos, building ways of helping students understand how to do research and helping to do that in a way that was customized to their institution. So we started to work with them to build those kind of services. Again, the key point here is this is a pretty long way from being a reference database aggregator. This is about really figuring out what are the core challenges of our constituents and how do we focus solutions on those problems. And related to that, a lot of our energy, especially as we develop topic pages, people began to say, wow, you're really teaching information literacy. You're really beginning to display different sources of information, authoritative sources, and when they're appropriate for different types of tasks. And so we've gone a long way to begin to focus on that question, is how can we help people be more knowledgeable about the types of resources they use, when they use them, how to evaluate information, how to share that information appropriately. And we see that as one of the most critical factors of developing a powerful and successful knowledge economy. So with that, again, this is a pretty graphic because we have a good designer, but really it tells more than that than just being pretty. You know, we start over here on the left, we have the beginning of what we started with aggregating reference content, and then you look over the last 3, 4, 5 years, we've rapidly accelerated how we've began to innovate. And that's the key message, is how do we continue to innovate at a faster and faster pace, because the world is more and more confusing and there are bigger and bigger challenges in front of us. And we want to do that because we need to be a must-have product for our customers. We want to be a must-have so that if they do face budget difficulties, if they do face challenges, that we're not, we're recognized as adding value, and we're recognized as helping them fulfill their mission. So with that in mind, we basically have grown pretty dramatically. About 4 years ago, we had 12 or 15 people. Now we're at 60 people. We have 2,500 customers around the world. Our growth rate continues to accelerate, so it's not just, even as we get bigger, we're growing faster, which is something I'm very happy with. And that more importantly, we've built the ability inside of our company to innovate faster and faster. We have it in our DNA now to be agile to market needs and to figure out how are we going to adapt to this environment so that we're not getting a death by 1,000 cuts, so to speak. We're actually being on the offensive to take on the challenges that we face. So in order to do that, we really morphed our positioning in the marketplace as much more of a solution provider, bringing together content, tools, and services to meet whatever challenges our library customers are facing. And also, we're beginning to develop, and we have developed, a very robust set of APIs that we were talking this morning about XML content. We've built a RESTful API framework that delivers JSON and XML, and we can take that content and use it as the building blocks of other applications all over the web, so that in order for us to be valuable, people don't necessarily have to come to our websites or our applications. Our content and tools can be consumed in other areas of the web, in other applications. And I think that's going to be one of the most critical factors for publishers and technology providers and educators, is how do you make sure that whatever you're doing in a local context can be shared more broadly with a broader set of audiences. And from that, we've developed more and more robust set of partnerships. So we're starting to partner with all sorts of technology partners all over the web to integrate more functionality into our platform. We've just integrated a homework help feature into our platform with real teachers available to help students with questions when they need them. We're using our API to power mobile applications for the state of Virginia. So we're constantly trying to figure out, how can we involve partnerships? How can we empower those partnerships? How can we either get traffic from partners or deliver traffic to them, or add more services and functionality to our customers so that they can demonstrate more value for the resources they spend with us. So going back to the beginning, what's at stake? Why does it matter? Why do we need an education revolution? Why are people saying there will be one? Again, I think this is a very big topic, obviously a controversial one, but there is some data that I'd just like to share as we look at this issue. The first data point here is 39% of Americans have a 2 or 4 year degree. That's interesting. That's pretty good. The interesting part is it's been steady for 4 decades. So personally, I don't think that's so good. As the world's gotten more complex and the number of high-quality jobs that don't require a 2 or 4 year degree have gone away, those jobs are no longer there. You can talk about why that is and what happened, but it's certainly a challenge many people feel needs to be addressed. And it is brought further into context, and again, I apologize, I'll take a second with this slide, but this is the percentage of population by country, different age cohorts. So the square is the percentage of population at between 55 and 64 years old that has a higher ed degree. And this triangle is 25 to 34-year-olds. Now, you may notice some people say, well, where's the U.S.? Again, that goes to the point that both of our square and our triangle are on top of each other. So then you look to the left, and when you look at 55 and 64-year-olds, we actually have one of the most well-educated populations. But if you look at the triangles, you'll see that since that generation went through, a dozen countries have passed us. So again, there's a lot of debate about this, but I think for me, it's something, as I think about my children, wanting to make sure that they're a part of a society where education is really important, really healthy, and growing and sustaining the success of our society. And it's further reinforced when you look at unemployment and labor force participation. We look at the top here, we look at high school if you don't have a high school degree, only 45% of those people participate in the labor force. And again, this is of adults older than 25 years old, so this is not counting younger people. And then you go down to the bottom, and if you have a bachelor's degree or higher, you're going to be participating in the labor force 3/4 of the time, 76%. And then again, you can also see the difference in unemployment rates. There's a fairly consistent correlation. Causality, perhaps not, but I think most of us would think there's some relationship there. So for me, that's a real impetus to why we need to get better, why education is likely to continue to change at a fast rate over the next coming decades. One firm that I've come across, or one organization that I came across recently that I was really impressed with, is the Lumina Foundation. I'd be interested, how many people know of Lumina? Okay, one, or two, or maybe three. I hadn't heard of them. I was pretty intrigued, and they have this goal, this audacious goal of how do we increase our attainment levels to 60% of the population having a higher ed degree by 2025. That's a pretty ambitious goal, because we have a lot of people that are, potentially past the prime learning years. And so that means that a much higher percentage of the younger people need to get an attainment in order to get the average to 60%. And what they have is a $1 billion endowment that they've raised to pursue this goal. And they're giving grants away to innovators and people that are looking at this challenge and trying to figure out how can we improve the system such that more people are getting those higher quality degrees. And they boil down 3 different areas that we need to work on in order to make progress. First is that people going into university and higher ed need to be better prepared academically, socially, and financially. Second, that people going in need to have a higher level of completion rate. I think only 50 or 60% of people finish within 6 years of starting a higher ed degree, so that's a pretty dramatic fall off. Again, lots of reasons why that happens, but those people clearly had an intention of getting a degree and haven't been successful in doing so. And then finally, we need to drive the level of productivity so the system can handle a greater capacity. And I think this goes to a lot of the things about these massive open online courses, is how do we build a system that can help more people learn simultaneously. So I believe all of these can be enabled to some degree or another by technology, and I believe all of them will be enabled to some degree by technology. And so when we sum up this whole question of what's at stake, I think the fact that we need more effective learning outcomes, we need the capacity that can serve more people, we have a system that's increasingly unstable from a cost perspective, and finally, we have what I would suggest is, over the last 10 years, a bunch of technologies that have emerged that can now enable this change, that the confluence of those factors are going to enable a great change in higher education and in learning in general. So with that in mind, where is education likely to go? And again, many of these aren't my thoughts. They're from what's being written about and talked about, but they seem to make a lot of sense to me. So if we look back at how technology has been used up until now in the learning environment, we see a lot of just replication of what was done in an offline environment. Just taking print materials, digitizing them as we talked about this morning, putting them online, using a learning management system to organize and make syllabi available and course materials available and things like that. And overall, certainly there's been efficiency gains and there's been convenience gains and interconnectivity gains, but maybe not major changes in the way people are learning or the outcomes of their learning. So as we look forward and we hypothesize, well, what's it going to look like? How is it going to evolve? We think there's going to be a big shift, again, from a lecture-centric kind of classroom style to more of a mentor-centric classroom style. And I think that Khan Academy with the flipped classroom model, you're hearing a lot about that, and we'll talk a little bit more about the success of that, but that's one model to suggest that this could be part of the equation. And of course, now with the ubiquitousness of devices and the access to the internet everywhere, we're going to start to move from one place where education happens in a room to any place at any time. And we're already seeing that. Students are connected all the time. But maybe there'll be real learning happening in those places, not just reading materials. There'll be real interactivity, simulations, quizzes, tests. It'll become the full learning environment there. And then going to the theme of the day, moving from a book-centric world of view to what I would like to call a learning-centric view, which is where basically the best resources assembled by the educators and the librarians and the people that want to impact the curriculum and the learning outcomes are gathering together all of these tools and bringing them together for users just in time, just as they need them to really promote learning. So to summarize, again, you could pick any number of trends or themes, but certainly I think there'll be a much more of a blending of the online and the offline. The education will become much more interactive. We saw an example of that today. O'Reilly showed a math, I can't remember what it was, but the quadratic formula, I guess, a tool for that. And again, I think that'll become part of the content, part of the learning environment. Again, the system will, because of the technology and computing power, will be able to be much more personalized. Again, that's something that's been promised for a long time, but with the way big data is unfolding, I think it's unquestionable that we'll be able to adapt to more learning styles and provide more custom experience. We'll be able to deliver content and tools, remediation services right in the right moment. And again, that goes to being more data-driven. I think we'll start to see the benefits of what we've had with social networks, and we'll start to see how those can actually be applied in the learning environment in ways that really impact learning outcomes, and really not just people checking in on Facebook and so forth, but actually really benefiting from the technology, the infrastructure that's been set up for that. And then I think we'll see a really large amount of interconnectivity around open source materials, around traditional textbooks provided by publishers, around everything that can be used to leverage in the learning environment. And the real goal here is how do we create an immersive, engaging environment that really drives more effective learning? I mean, that's the hope here. It's not just about putting lots more people in the system and still getting 50% out as graduates, but actually having a real impact in moving the needle both on the supply side and on the outcome side. So with that, I'd like to just move to where are we in this transition? What are the pockets of innovation? There's a lot going on. It's very hard to make sense of, and I actually tried to create a spectrum of initiatives and tried to place different things on that spectrum. That was a futile effort because there's things that are just blended all over the place, and things, you can't talk about massive open online courses without thinking about issues of credentialing or thinking about issues of where are the course materials going to come from, how are publishers going to participate in that, is this a threat to their businesses? And so, I've done my best to sort of summarize, and I would encourage you to jot down any of these firms or companies that you think are interesting and go and take a look afterwards and try to understand what they're doing and why they may be part of the future or maybe not. So just at a high level, we have a lot of innovation around digital textbooks, and that's a wide variety of spectrum, right? So you have people that are just replicating the print world in a digital environment. They're getting massive amount of books up there, and so you can read it on any device. It's convenient. There's lots of benefits to that. Then you have other people like an Inkling or something that are making totally much more interactive textbooks, really reinventing the way the textbook is going to be in the future, although I would argue they're still not very far along down that direction in terms of where we will end up getting to. And then you have other people that are helping develop platforms where you can make your own textbooks, and you can have those available in multiple formats, or you can start with an open source textbook, and then you can refine that and adjust that and make it your own. So there's the make it your own and build your own. And then you have other players like Cengage and Pearson, and they're starting to build whole course solutions. So it's not just the digital textbook content, it's actually the interactive quizzes and the assessment tools and the all of the different aspects of the learning environment. I mean, that's a pretty ambitious goal to build a whole course solution, but they're clearly putting a lot of money into that direction. And that'll in a way kind of, the digital textbook will be a relic of the past. It will just be absorbed into those environments and be focused on learning modules rather than a linearly structured textbook. So there's a real transformation there. And then, of course, we have to talk about the massive open online courses. And so those are perhaps where, if my own opinion, I think that disruption may be the greatest in the short run, because I do think that there's a little bit like our experience with Wikipedia. Once the open source community, once people get excited about ideas like this, and we can all say, well, there's no business model, how's it going to work, and so forth. A lot of times those things do end up being very successful on the web, and the speed at which they're growing right now indicates to me that they are likely to have a very successful outcome. Now, to what that means for the whole education system, I don't know, but as a tool themselves, I do think they're going to be a really interesting thing to see unfold in the next 5 years. So going back to some of these players, some of them I'm sure, how many people have heard of Academic Pub? Okay, again, still a fairly maybe a quarter of the room, 20% of the room. Again, they allow a professor to create a customized textbook or course pack. They've gone out and gotten license agreements with a variety of publishers, and they can clear rights with the Copyright Clearance Center so that a professor can put a package of materials together, make it available electronically or make it available in a print form. There's a business model around that. It's a nice innovation from what's traditionally been done. Then, of course, you have the iBooks too, and focusing on the K through 12 market, some interactive features, reasonably priced, not a big connection to assessment tools there. So that's, again, one of the initiatives around digital textbooks. iTunes U is where they're doing that for the higher ed marketplace, allowing some level of authoring of the materials so that it can be a little bit customized. But again, a lot of different people doing a lot of different things. There's no core one size fits all. This market hasn't sort of leveled out yet for sure. One of the big players is CourseSmart. CourseSmart is a funded startup by the big publishers, so they have the money and they have all the content, so it's a way for the big publishers to stay as the primary driver of innovation and stay control over their content while also moving into the more digital world. And they do allow for rental models, and again, that's another thing that's really in flux is buy content, rent content, and I think that's a really, again, goes to the disruption and makes it very hard for the consumer, the end user, to figure out what they should do because there's so many choices. So now there's sites emerging that are helping students figure out the best deals, helping them understand what the options are, what the level of flexibility, and those kind of partnerships will increase as people need help navigating these choices. Another really interesting business, again, how many people have heard of Flat World? Okay, so Flat World's a little more popular, maybe a third of the audience. That's a fascinating business. They have an open source textbook they start with, but they allow the professor to dramatically change what's in it if they want to, use sections, not use sections. They even have assessment tools and other things that can be integrated into that textbook. And their business model, I do think, is worth talking about because they don't charge for any of the content, so it's truly an open source environment. You can go onto your web browser, you can view anything you want, but the moment you want it on another device or you want it printed, now you have to pay something. So, and those charges range, I think, from $15. This says $25, but I think they're actually even a lower market. So again, I think that's an interesting model. I know personally when I have to pay for content in different forms, like the Wall Street Journal having to pay for it in an iPhone form and then an iPad form and then to go online and pay for it. It's just is a really bad business model. I don't like that very much. So I don't know how successful that will be. And again, it goes to the fact that there's so much transition and disruption that they have to have lots of different choices to feed a lot of different demand about how people want to consume. One of the platforms with a lot of titles, but not a lot of interactivity is No. And I don't know a lot about them personally. I haven't talked to them, but it's a fascinating, again, this is the model where, and we went through this with Credo, we did a lot of innovation early on. We had this visualization tool, we had a lot of rich markup, we had a lot of interconnectivity, but some of our competitors that all they did was take a PDF version of a printed book and put it online were more successful because it was more comfortable, a more incremental step from where they had been before. Didn't really leverage new technology, new medium, but it was understandable. Okay, well, I've always bought this book and put it on a shelf. Now I can buy it. It looks exactly the same, has page numbers, and I can put it on a shelf, and even if it's a digital shelf. So that was a different, so I think there's room for a lot of these different players. One big investment that the Nature Publishing Group has made, again, anybody heard or downloaded this book? So The Principles of Biology is a much more interactive book. In this case, unlike Inkling, which is a third party, the Nature Publishing Group has taken on this initiative as a publisher. So they're not relying on the third party to add the value and the interactivity to the text and rethink it in a digital form. They're actually embedding that. They're doing that, investing in that. And they have a plan to build that out across all of their science textbooks. And again, going to the question of, well, if students come to them and purchase it directly, or professors do, can that be a more sustainable business model for them rather than having to distribute through all the other platforms and give those platforms a large share of the pie? And this is a pretty nice price, $49. I haven't bought a lot of textbooks recently, but I think that's a pretty reasonably priced, especially for a lot of the value that they're adding. So the advantage that publishers have in the digital world with DRM is they don't have to worry about the used market, because if they sell it once, they can then sell it. They've sold it to that customer, then they know they're going to participate in every customer who uses it, at least theoretically. So Newton is a really interesting model. This is where adaptive learning comes in. I think this is still fairly new. I believe Cengage has a partnership with Newton to embed their tools into their new platform, which is called MindTap, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But it's a real adaptive learning tool. So it's, we're all used to test taking that adapts based on how you answer questions and so forth. But this actually serves different content based on how you behave on the site and based on how you learn and how it thinks you learn. So it even can show you more videos if you seem to respond better to video content versus text content. So I'm confident we'll see more of this. How fast this evolves, I have no way of knowing, but it's really the holy grail of being able to be highly personalized, highly adaptive to the user situation, and give them more and more feedback in real time rather than waiting till the end of the semester or the end of the period to assess performance. So here's MindTap. Again, now we're moving into the whole course solution where they're trying to bring together the digital content, digital textbooks. They're trying to make sure they're platform agnostic. They're trying to bring in assessment tools, quizzes, everything they can into one environment, one platform. And what I really like here is they're trying to, at least initially, take more of an open philosophy, allowing other people to build apps for this platform. Now, in the long term, I don't know, because big publishers aren't always keen on being super open, but more and more I think that they're recognizing that's a good strategy to employ. Let other people develop for their platform. It makes their platform more successful, more sticky, adds more value to the user, and hopefully drives adoption. So that was the one example of a whole course solution. Now we're going to talk a little bit about what happens with the online courses and building tools for that. Google just came out with Course Builder, I think, in the last 6 weeks. They had built a course around doing advanced search on the web, and the tool set that they used for that, they decided to repurpose and make available to the educator community so that courses could be built on top of that framework, could leverage that installation. And again, this is an open source, free platform. Perhaps one of the ones that gets the most conversations is Coursera. Coursera just doubled the number of universities that are offering classes through that. They were at 16 or 17. They added 16 more recently. It provides video lectures and even has interactive exercises for the students. And then, of course, we just saw the beginning of this presentation. We talked about edX and the initiative by Harvard and MIT, and now including Berkeley, to make more of their courses available. And how many people have played with these different systems and looked at what it might be like to take a course online? So yeah, at least half the audience. And I think it's definitely a worthwhile exercise to see what the offering is, what the commitments level are. I was really interested to see the difference in terms of some offering credentials, some offering to sign a certificate based on how well you did in the class or that you completed the class. And I think that's going to be really a big gating issue, right, is what level of credentialing are you going to get? How are you going to demonstrate competency after this class? Those are the big issues to be worked out. But I think that will come relatively quickly. And some universities are already accepting the credit from these classes if competency can be developed or demonstrated. And then maybe one that started a lot of this whole discussion, this whole movement, the Khan Academy. Have people used Khan Academy? No, a lot fewer here. So that's a fascinating model, right? So the Salman Khan came up with a conversational style of way of teaching things, developed the videos, put them up. People started to use them to learn concepts, to help their children with math, help their children with other subject areas. And then it started to evolve into this idea of a flipped classroom model, where the student might go home and look at a lecture through a service like Khan Academy, and then come into the classroom and get help from the teacher, working through homework, getting help, working through issues they were having. So you really begin to change the way, that to me is a fundamental change, I think everybody would agree, in the way education is done. So that's a really interesting model. I do have a little bit of data on that I'll share. I think it's fascinating to me. There was an experiment where a group of students were working with TAs with their homework around in physics, and the control group was working with a Nobel Prize physicist, actually receiving lectures. And then when they tested the two different groups at the end, they found that the control group, who had been working with the physicist, performed half as well. Now, one study, there's not lots of data, so we can argue all day long about whether this can be replicated or not, but it certainly will continue to push the debate forward and not close the door that this is a potential new way of moving forward. Another one that I think is perhaps even more interesting is that when they flipped the classroom, attendance dramatically increased. So that, I think, is a really, really important thing, because I can't imagine many teachers enjoy, I certainly wouldn't be enjoying standing here if there were 3 people in the audience. I mean, it would be a little bit awkward. And so I think that clearly if professors find that it's a more effective way to engage their students and they do better on tests, that it'll be something that will continue to grow and expand. So that's sort of a summary of where we've been coming from, why there's such change perhaps, and where we might be headed in terms of the evolving learning environment. And I did want to share a video. I was at an O'Reilly conference, I guess last October. They have a Web 2.0 conference. They used to have it. They don't have it anymore. And I got to observe a conversation between Fred Wilson and Carlotta Perez. Fred Wilson is probably one of the foremost VC people in the internet world, going back to the early 2000s or maybe even mid-90s, with a firm called Union Square Ventures. They funded Zynga and Foursquare and a bunch of other ones. He's sort of the king of New York tech. And so wherever you go in New York, you see him a lot. And he was suggesting that his thesis for investment had been really developed or furthered by this woman, Carlotta Perez. I don't know, does anybody know Carlotta Perez? Okay. So she's a fascinating woman. She's done a lot of work on technology revolutions over the last 150 years. She looked at the the canal mania, trains. She looked at steel industry evolution, mass production, and the latest one she's been looking at is the revolution in information and how that's transforming the world. And so this clip talks a little bit about her perspective on these revolutions and how they typically play out and the impact that they have on society.
In every single one of these, there's something. Huge bubble and a huge crash. Okay.
Every time we have canal mania, canal panic, we have railway mania, railway panic, and so on, and then we have the roaring 20s, and then now this time we have 2. We have a master crash, and then we have the 2008. Both bubbles and both crashes. It was have a meaning and they have a fully installed, and now it can help the rest of all industries innovate across all industries, thanks to these new technologies. Across the globe this time.
So I was pretty inspired by that. That was given all the confusion and how hard it is to navigate the change that is happening and the the pace at which it's happening, and to be a CEO and to have a vision and have to be able to express that vision and be confident in it, to understand and be able to put this in a larger context of how these technological revolutions sort of unfold, and that all of these bubbles are just part of the natural cycle of things. That was a nice 25-minute interview, and in the middle she does talk about the period we're in now, which is this sort of stagnation, this longer period with lower growth and a lot of uncertainty. And so from that, I think there's really good reason to be hopeful, to really think that there's a really a good benefit that will come of all this change, even though if it is kind of scary and disruptive, as the gentleman from MIT said at the beginning, there's a real reason to believe the world will be better for this, and that the outcome will help to raise the overall societal well-being. So with that, I guess I would really say that we're really at the beginning of a major change in education. I don't think anything we've seen up till now really is what I would consider massively big change in the way people learn, but I think we will see that in the coming decade for sure. I don't have any idea how fast it will unfold. I can tell you that when we manage at our business, we look at what are the things we need to do to be prepared depending on how fast change comes, and how can we adapt to that change as quickly as possible. That's how we think about our business. And then I really think this is an important point that we should not lose sight of, is that sometimes technologists will innovate for technology's sake, and they'll innovate based on what they think is best. And sometimes there isn't a great conversation between the technologists and the other stakeholders, and that's something that's really important, is that everybody who is going to be impacted by these changes make sure their voice is heard, and that their value is understood, and where they can contribute to get involved. And I think that that's incumbent on both sides. You know, people who think that they have something to contribute need to push for that contribution, and likewise the technology industry needs to also continue to ask and invite participation. And so that's a critical thing. And the last thing is, you have to really look at, well, what is it? What do I do? Where's the value that I can add in this? What can I do? Not what have I always done? What am I good at? But where can I add value? This is clearly, we're going to need all of us to unleash this revolution and to bring it to its maximum potential. And so thinking about that question, I think, is really important for each of us as we look out. And certainly that's how we've grown Credo. We continue to look at, wow, there's a lot of headwinds, there's challenges, but what can we do as a company to help offset those challenges and still be successful, continue to grow and thrive, even if it's not the best conditions. So with that, I'll be happy to take some questions. And I think we have 15 minutes.
Yes.
Great. Yes.
Courses that are available.
I think that's a great question. I mean, and in fact, I would say that the way Lumina says it is, I should have emphasized, high quality credentials. They do try to, or high quality, they don't call it degrees. They use a different, because they're actually also trying to develop a set of certifications or set of ways to develop, to demonstrate competency without having to have that piece of paper from a traditional institution. So they do exactly understand that point, and I think it's an excellent point. That, and I think other people will say, well, you know, there are so many other things you get from a traditional residential education environment that you can't get online, and that's absolutely true. And so it's going to be a both and. It's going to be, how can we incorporate both things? Oh. Mm. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of schools do a really good job of making the learning environment more experiential and really, I mean, we know when we look at Edgar Dale's Cone of Learning, how people retain and learn better. So if you just read something, you retain 10% of that information. If you actually get engaged and act out something, you can retain 90% of that information. So I think there's a great possibility for residential environments to become much more participatory, much more engaging. I think, the lecture hall with 200 kids watching somebody at the front of the room is going to be a tough sell if that's the core value of why you're going to that institution in the long run. But there's a lot of other things that can happen inside of an institution, a lot of experimentation, a lot of testing, and those kind of things I think will survive. And I think a lot of universities will adapt to that very quickly, begin to shift how that can be done. Right. Yeah, I mean, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I think there are huge differences between the resources at different universities, the different focus of different research universities or community colleges. I mean, there's all this variation. So I think it'll have to be an institution by institution decision. I don't think you'll see, everything change overnight in every institution. But I do think ones that struggle financially and are really trying to figure out how to do this will get innovative about how to do that. And based on the success of that, it'll either continue to grow more rapidly or maybe not as fast. Yeah, that's a more complicated space, or well, I guess it's probably not as a there are a lot of innovations there, but I would say there are more hurdles in the K through 12 space because one of the biggest ones is these issues. I mean, bring your own device. What device are we going to settle on? Can we afford to give every kid in a K through 12 system an iPad? What happens when they lose the iPad? So whereas on a university campus, you can assume that most students have 2 or 3 devices and so forth. So I think the same things are being looked at. But I think it is more complicated, and I think it'll be slower to see the rate of change. All right, great. Thank you very much.